you have your Bibles, if you'll turn back, we turn to Joshua chapter 9. This week, before I go into the message here, this week my wife made a foolish decision. It's a good way to start a sermon, isn't it? She made a bad decision. She bought an exercise ball. You know those heavy balls? It's only 15 pounds. Anybody can handle that, right? Yeah. So she bought this thing and brought it home. Good price for this ball, so she just brought it home. And the kids, they get this competitive nature going, and they're like, oh yeah, we can do this. So they lay on the floor and start lifting this thing up and seeing how many they can do. Well, I've got a competitive side to me too. I'm like, yeah, I can beat that. So I end up doing this, and I got to 150. By the way, once you get to 150, there's parts of your body that says, we're done. You can keep going, but I'm out. So I'm doing that. I'm like, all right, that's it. I beat it. I beat the kids. Josiah comes in. He does 200. Like, it's not right. It's not right. So then I'm thinking, all right, tomorrow, I'll beat him. It's only to find out when I come home, he's done 400. So last night, I made a decision. My wife's bad decision wasn't enough, so I wanted to back it up with my own bad decision. And I did 500 last night. I woke up this morning, and after I cried a little bit to Jesus, I got out of bed. I'm going to need help. So if you see me pick up my water and it's like this today, that's what's going on. If I'm standing like this, that's normal, right? So I just want to let you know, sometimes we make bad decisions in life, like I do every once in a while. Don't let your competitive nature run the show. Just be smart. If he beats 500, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. I might be smart, or I might just get down and try again. Have you ever made a bad deal in life? And everybody's like, yes, I made a bad deal. We've all made a bad deal before. And when you realize you've made a bad decision, you get that gutted feeling inside. Like, man, I shouldn't have done that. And sometimes it's so much worse than just a bad decision as far as exercise. Exercise, by the way, it's a good choice. But your body says that was a bad call. You should never have done that. You start hurting in places you didn't even know you had places. And your body says, let's not do that again. That seems like a bad decision, but there are a lot greater decisions in life that are a lot worse bad decisions than just exercise. And we've all made those bad decisions in life. That's the kind of feeling you get when you buy your first home. You buy that brand new home, or that home new to you, home, and then you realize after a year or two that there's some things that need your attention. The roof starts leaking, pipes start bursting, electrical issues start presenting themselves, showing their ugly faces, and you realize you bought a money pit. You know those feelings when you're like, okay, I made a bad decision. You want your money back. But you have done this thing that you can't reverse. Remember that big pile of papers they give you when you buy a home? If you've ever bought a home before, they give you this, it's like a stack of papers. We just need you to sign here and here, initial here and sign here. And then that, after about 30, 40 minutes of that, you've signed all these papers and whatever. They hand you the keys to your brand new investment, and you're on your way. You got your home. Only to find out you bought a money pit. Now you want your money back now. You don't want the responsibility that comes with that new house. You don't want all the responsibility that comes with all the repairs and stuff, because that's on you. You can't call the bank and say, hey, by the way, my roof's leaking. That's no problem. Sign something else and we'll help you. No, I want you to fix it because there was a problem when I bought this house, and it's yours. It's your problem now. You have to fix that. See, that stack of papers that you signed, that was the contract. And the contract doesn't care about your happiness, and it doesn't care about your feelings. I'm telling you, I've signed contracts. They don't care about your feelings. The only thing it cares about is fulfillment. I want you to fulfill the contract. That's the only thing the contract cares about is the fulfillment. you're locked into the contract and all the responsibility that comes with that contract. That's just what you have. And even if you walk away from that house, you say, okay, I'm done. I'm walking away. I'm just leaving it behind. We're driving away and we're getting something else. You know what you still have to do? You still have to pay for that house, because the contract doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your happiness. It just wants to be fulfilled. So even if you drive away from that house, you still have your signature on something, and it says you still have to pay for your decision. You still have to go back. There are consequences for your signature on that piece of paper. And even if you want to drive away and forget about it, there's still a contract. In the book of Joshua, we find Israel signing one of these bad contracts, making one of these bad decisions. Before Israel entered into the promised land, God told them what needed to be done, and he told them why it needed to be done. So look at Deuteronomy chapter 20 and verse 16. It says, but of the cities of these people which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, you shall let nothing that breathes remain alive, but you shall utterly destroy them, the Hittite and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite, just as the Lord your God has commanded you, lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations, which they have done for their gods, and you sin against the Lord your God. Israel was supposed to remove the influence of these pagan nations. Otherwise, they would turn Israel's heart away from God. God knows what's going to happen. If you don't get rid of the influence, you will be influenced. He tells the same thing to Solomon. Don't take wives from these other nations, because they will turn your heart away from God. Solomon, 1,000 women later. Wisest man that ever lived, by the way. There's got to be something there. Wisest man that ever lived has 1,000 women. And you know what he finds out? By the way, they'll pull your heart away from God. They will do that, just as God said. God has been by Israel's side all the way. He has split the waters of the Jordan River so they could cross over the Jordan River into the Promised Land. He has taken down the walls of Jericho. Walls fell down and they were able to conquer Jericho. He helped them defeat the city of Ai. And the word is getting around that Israel's God is a real threat to the pagan nations. Israel's God really means business. He can not only did he tell Israel to do what he told them to do, he's backing them up. You don't just cross a river on dry land. You don't do that. It's a river. It's wet under there. But God makes it so they can cross the river. He takes down Jericho and Ai. There's a lot of power in their God. So it's not only that they're supposed to do this, their God's backing them up. So it's a real threat to the pagan nations. So the Gibeonites, one of these pagan nations, decide to form a strategy of defense. And by the way, this is a smart move on the Gibeonites' part. You can look at it, and I'm kind of impressed with that. But this is one of the pagan nations that's supposed to be destroyed. So look at what they do in Joshua chapter 9 and verse 3. When the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they worked craftily and went and pretended to be ambassadors. And they took old sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins torn and mended, old and patched sandals on their feet, and old garments on themselves, and all the bread of their provision was dry and moldy. This plan was ingenious. They decided to disguise themselves as travelers rather than inhabitants of the land. We're going to pretend we're from a long way away, because they're supposed to destroy all the inhabitants of the land. So let's pretend that we're not inhabitants of the land. These guys want to form an alliance with Israel. They want Israel to sign a contract. We just want to make a deal with you. Make a covenant with us. Sign this contract. But you can't just walk in and say, hey, sign here. You can't just do that. So as a nation that God has commanded to be destroyed, you're going to need a plan. We're the people that God says to wipe out. So we can't just go up to Israel and say, hey, sign here. We just, make a covenant with us. You can't do that. So they need a plan, and that's what they came in with. Look at verse 6 of Joshua chapter 9. And they went to Joshua to the camp at Gilgal and said to him and to the men of Israel, We have come from a far country. Now therefore make a covenant with us. Then the men of Israel said to the Hivites, which are also the Gibeonites, perhaps you dwell among us, so how can we make a covenant with you? But they said to Joshua, we are your servants. And Joshua said to them, who are you, and where do you come from? As you can see, the people of Israel are a little bit skeptical here. The Gibeonites come up and say, hey, we're from a far country, and, we're your servants, and, that humble approach. And Joshua says, who are you, and where do you come from? I'm a little bit skeptical. We've never met you before. You're brand new to the area, you say. We want to know what the truth is, because, as it says there, perhaps you dwell among us, so how can we make a covenant with you? We're not supposed to make a covenant with the people that dwell among us. We're supposed to get rid of them. These strangers want to make a covenant with them, but they know nothing about them. This is where the Gibeonites need to step up with some well-polished salesmanship. They are standing face to face with the people that God said to destroy them. They're now standing face to face with them. They walked right into enemy territory here. It's time for them to sell the story. By the way, it's a bad move to walk up to your enemy, ever. You don't just walk up to your enemy and say, oh, by the way, let's sign here. You don't do that. So they are now standing in front of their enemies, knowing that they're supposed to be destroyed by Israel. So it's time for them to sell this. They get one shot. Look at verse 9. So they said to him, from a very far country your servants have come, because of the name of the Lord your God. For we have heard of his fame, and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. Therefore, our elders and all the inhabitants of our country spoke to us, saying, take provisions with you for the journey, and go to meet them, and say to them, we are your servants. Now therefore make a covenant with us. They even have a backstory prepared here. We got a whole plan here. We've got a backstory to go with this. Joshua asked them where they came from, and their answer was filled with more details than he required. That's a suspicious thing in itself. Here's a lot more detail than you asked for. We heard about the greatness and the power of your God. You've got a great God. We're impressed with your God. So our people asked us to come and ask you for your friendship. We want to sign up with you. We want to follow your God too. We've got some serious buttering up going on in this story. Your God's awesome. We've heard about your God. He's amazing. And we want to sign a contract with you. We want to make a covenant with you. But if the backstory wasn't enough, they came prepared with some evidence pointing to the validity of their deception. Just in case the backstory isn't going to sell it, we need some evidence to back up our deception. Look at verse 12. This bread of ours we took hot for our provision from our houses on the day we departed to come to you. But now look, it is dry and moldy. And these wineskins which were filled with new, or were new, and see, they are torn, and these are our garments, and our sandals have become old because of a very long journey. These guys are lying through their teeth, but the evidence is persuasive. Look, when we left our land, this bread was fine. It was hot. It was fresh. And now look at it. It's moldy. Look at the sandals on our feet. They're all worn. Look at our wineskins. They're all worn. They're torn. They're tattered. It's been a long, long trip. The evidence indicates that they must not be nearby neighbors. They've come a long distance. It takes some time for these things to wear down. So their evidence seems to point to the fact that they're not from around here. They've come a long, long way. Their story sounds good. Their evidence suggests that they're telling the truth. What's Israel supposed to do? It's pretty convincing. It's pretty convincing. There was one thing they could have done, but they failed to do. There's one thing Israel could have done, but they failed to do it. Look at verse 14. Then the men of Israel took some of their provisions, but they did not ask counsel of the Lord. I want to mention something extremely important before we go on. God knew that the Gibeonites were trying to deceive Israel. God knew about that. He knew what was going on. And he would have told them if they would have taken some time to seek his counsel. God would have told them. But they don't, and God doesn't. This is the type of situation where most people blame God when things don't turn out right. This is where we blame God. God knew what could happen, and he allowed it to happen anyway. I really want to emphasize this. God is not wanting to micromanage your life. That's not what God's seeking to do. That's not what he wants to do. He wants to live your life with you. He doesn't want to micromanage your life. He wants to live it with you. Our choices are our choices to make. We have free will. Make your choices. You have the freedom to do that. God just wants to be acknowledged when we're in the process of making those decisions. Acknowledge me. Talk to me. Spend some time with me. But we are free to live our lives. Every single one of us are free to live our lives, and God is not going to micromanage it for you. You are free to make your own decisions. Israel does not seek the Lord in this scenario, and they move forward and they make a call. Look at verse 15. So Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them, to let them live. And the rulers of the congregation swore to them. The contract has been signed. Israel has promised to be the Gibeonites' protectors. You got it. We will protect you. Let's make this covenant. They gave their word, and God is going to expect them to act with integrity. You gave them your word, and I expect you to move forward with integrity on this. Even though you were not supposed to make a covenant with them, you made a covenant. You gave them your word. Now you act with integrity. Keep your word. They should have considered God in their decision, but they did not do that. Now the responsibility to uphold their side of the contract is on their shoulders. You've made the covenant. You signed the contract. Now you've got to uphold that contract. You've got to do what you said you were going to do. That's when they become fully informed of the small print in the contract. Isn't that always nice? There's always, you got that contract and it all looks good. And when you sign the contract, don't the people, they pick up the paper and they go, okay, this is what this is saying, sign here. And you don't have to read this because this is what this is saying, sign here. And this is what this is saying. And see that little bitty print down there? All that's saying is this. Go ahead and sign. Saves you some time, doesn't it? Whew, I'm glad he told me what it was all about. Otherwise, I would have had to read all that. It would have been a good idea, but we just sign. We usually just sign. Now Israel is about to find out what the small print looks like in the contract. Look at verse 16. And it happened at the end of 3 days, after they had made the covenant with them, that they heard that they were their neighbors who dwelt near them. Surprise, surprise. This is what you call buyer's remorse. You ever done that? Like, oh man, I should not have made that decision. This is what they're going through right here. This is buyer's remorse. They've been deceived, and now they know they've been deceived. Israel ends up going to the Gibeonites' territory. We're going to talk to these people. We know where they live now. We are going to talk to these people. But when they get there, they realize their hands are tied. Revenge is not an option. Oh, no, you're not. Why? You remember the contract? Oh yeah, we got to protect them. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Small print. Small print. It's all right there in the contract. You made a covenant to protect these people. Now you've got to carry that contract. You've got to let it be fulfilled. You move forward with integrity. Revenge is not an option. So look what happens in verse 18. But the children of Israel did not attack them, because the rulers of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel. And all the congregation complained against the rulers. The leaders' decision to protect the people of Gibeon has angered the Israelites. Now they have issues within their own camp. We didn't have issues inside of our own camp before, but now we have issues inside of our own camp. Our own people are mad at us now. That's a new problem that came with the contract. We signed the contract. Now we've got problems at home. The consequences of the contract are already wanting to be fulfilled. It doesn't take any time at all. Joshua, who's already bound to protect the Gibeonites, wants to know why they've done this. Why did you do this to us? Look at verse 22. Then Joshua called for them, and he spoke to them, saying, "Why have you deceived us, saying we are very far from you when you dwell near us? Now therefore you are cursed, and none of you shall be freed from being slaves, woodcutters, and water carriers for the house of my God." Joshua asked them why they deceived them. Then he tells them that they will serve as Israel's servants because of their deception. You will always be servants to our God now. You locked yourself in. You have our protection, but you will be our slaves. You will serve our God with us. No problem. Serving God is better than dying. It's so much better. The Gibeonites are safe. This is still a good deal for them. The verbal contract's been signed. It's already been signed. Israel is bound by their word to protect the Gibeonites. You're stuck. You're stuck. You're bound to this. But Joshua still wants to know why they created such a dishonest alliance. Why did you do this to us? And their answer had to be one of the most difficult things Joshua ever heard. Place yourself, you've been made the leader of God's people. You're leading them into the promised land, to the inheritance God said you could have. You're the example for all these people to follow. Now you go up and you've made a covenant with these people you should have never made a covenant with. You realize you just you signed a bad contract there. I shouldn't have done this. So you say, why did you do this to us? You said you were from a far country and you were actually our neighbors. Why did you do this to us? And because you've done this, you will now serve us for the remainder of your days. You will serve us. But I want to know why you did this to us in the first place. Their answer would have been crushing. Put yourself in Joshua's position and look at verse 24 of Joshua chapter 9. So they answered Joshua and said, "Because your servants were clearly told that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. Therefore, we were very much afraid for our lives because of you and have done this thing." The reason they did what they did was because they knew what God wanted and they knew he was faithful to provide it. Why did you do this? Because we believe your God. We know what your God wants, and we know he's faithful to help you get what he promised to give you. We believe this. The Gibeonites were considering God in their actions more than the Israelites were considering God in theirs. That would have been a low blow. Why'd you do this? Because we have faith in your God. Maybe you should have talked to him first before you signed the contract. But you didn't. Now we're safe. But the reason we did this is because we've heard of your God and we believe he was able to provide what he said he would provide. This answer was probably an incredible eye-opener to Joshua. Wow. Good move, by the way. Believing in our God. That was smart. Way to trust him. Maybe we should have done that too. But the contract's been signed. He made a bad decision and he has just been introduced to the reality that he did not consider God when he made that decision. Satan always has more paperwork of small print in the contract than he has of large print. There's always so much more small print in every contract. Sinful decisions have consequences. God promised us in the Bible, it's all laid out. Sin brings destruction all the time. You do this, it's going to destroy you in some way or another. And you think, well, I sinned this one time and it didn't destroy me. You know what it did? It opened you up to seeing, hey, there weren't any consequences to this, so now I can take it a little bit farther the next time. It did destroy you because now you're doing this sin here, which you would have never thought you'd ever do. But it's taking you one step farther. Any sin will destroy you. It changes your character. It tears you down. So you think, well, this one I got away with. Nothing bad happened here. So now it's okay to do this one. Nothing yet? Okay, we can go farther and farther and farther. Every sin brings destruction. Every single sin brings destruction. Joshua found out sometimes the consequences even begin immediately. Sometimes you don't have to wait. Sometimes it happens right away. When the kings of Canaan found out what the Gibeonites had done, they decided to bring the fight right to Joshua's front door. Look at Joshua chapter 10 in verse 3. Therefore, Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoam, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jermuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up to me and help me, that we may attack Gibeon, for he has made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Joshua and the Israelites have now found themselves in a battle with several nations at once. All of these nations are rising up against us all at the same time. Now, they could have fought these nations one at a time, but that ship has sailed. You don't get to do the small little jobs. No, they're all rising up against you at once. It's time to pay up. You sign a contract and it's time to pay up. They promised to protect the Gibeonites, and that's what they must do. We are going to attack the Gibeonites, all of these nations against that one nation. Yeah, but we promised to protect that one nation. Well, guess what that means you have to do? You have to pay. You have to pay up. You sign the contract, now you're involved. It's time to pay up even the small print. You're bound to that. Israel fought this battle with all these kings. They fought against all these nations, and God did help them get through it. That's the good news. God still goes through the fire with you. He's still there with you. But they still had to do it. But it was brought about by a bad contract. You wouldn't have had to go through that. But you signed a bad contract. You made a bad covenant. Bad contracts always offer tempting propositions. Always. That's that large print. That's the tempting stuff. House, all yours. Price, not so bad. Yeah, I'll sign there. Oh, they didn't look at the small print. They signed it. Everything's theirs. You get there, you find out the roof falls in, the place is about to go up in flames because of the electrical issues. Hey, I want to go back on that contract. No go. It's yours. All those problems are yours. You get to fix those. I can't afford to fix those. Not our problem. Contract doesn't care about your feelings. It just wants fulfillment. Sin does the same thing. I didn't know it was going to cost me this. I didn't know it was going to take me down this road. I didn't know it was going to hurt this relationship. I didn't know all about this. So, you signed. All that comes with it. You signed a bad contract. That's what sin does every single time. It will destroy you. Sin, making a contract with sin, is like those quick loan type places. You know those, hey, you want money today? No problem. How much money you want? Well, that's a lot of money. All yours today. We can give it to you all today. You may get all the money you want in the beginning, but your new interest rate's going to take you down. What's my interest rate? 97%. Like, whoa. Don't you think that's not fair? Oh, absolutely, it's not fair. Then don't do it. Oh no, we're going to do it. You signed. You said you'd pay. Yeah, but I'm going to pay on that so many times over. That's how it works. That's how it works. You may get everything you thought you wanted when you decided to sin, but it's going to cost you so much more because you decided to sign that bad contract. That's how sin works. You end up paying way more than you received in the beginning. It's such a dangerous road to go down, but we do it. We do this kind of stuff. And we're free to make our own decisions in life. We're all free to make our own choices. God is not micromanaging you. But he does ask for us to do one thing while we're choosing what our life should look like. He's asking you to do one thing. Look at Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, Acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. I'm asking you to do one thing before you make your decisions in life. Acknowledge me. Acknowledge me in that decision. Consider me. Before you move forward and sign that contract, think about me. Think about me. I really want to do this. Consider me first. Before you make these decisions, just consider me. In all your ways, in everything you do, acknowledge me. I'll help direct your path. I'll help you go down the right way. I'm going to sign this contract. God, think about me. Maybe I shouldn't do it. Absolutely. Go this way instead. Go this way. I'll direct your path. But acknowledge me. Before you make any of your choices in life, think about me. God does not tell us what to do at every crossroad in our lives. He doesn't do that. So many people try to figure out what God's will is before they make even the smallest decision. Should I choose chocolate or vanilla? God, what would you have me do today? Well, I don't care. Which one you like? Just make a choice. A lot of times we're trying to seek God's will in everything we do. Should I go to this college or that college? Well, pray about it. Ask for wisdom, but then you're going to make your choice. What if I choose wrong? How are you going to choose wrong? Whatever choice you do, whatever choice you make, understand that Jesus is going to live that out with you. Should I do this job or that job? Well, pick one. I'll go with you. We'll reach the people there. Should I marry this person or that person? Well, use wisdom, seek the Lord in this, and then you're going to have to pick. What if I choose wrong? Well, then you'll have to pay that contract. You'll just go with the choices you make. But they're your choices to make. Just remember, I'll go with you through everything. Everything. God's not saying there's this person and there's this college and there's this job and there's this specific thing. And if you choose anything other than that, you're out of my will. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Jesus Christ is God's will for your life. That's it. What's God's will for my life? Jesus Christ. Well, what's his perfect will for my life? Jesus Christ. That's God's will for your life. Everything else should be done in remembrance of that right there. But you have the freedom to do everything else. Just acknowledge him when you're making your choices. It's not that God's saying, well, choice is good, and this choice, it'll still work out, but this was my perfect one. No, he's gonna let you make the choices. Just remember, Jesus Christ is God's will for your life, so consider him before you make your choices, but you're free to make your choices. In all your ways, in every decision you make, in your speech, in your actions, in your choices, he wants you to acknowledge him. Just acknowledge me. And let's move forward together. I'll go with you. I'll live with you. I'm not going to live in spite of you, and you shouldn't live in spite of me. We're going to move forward together. We're going to go in this together. If you're considering God in your decisions, you will make healthy choices. So in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. The reason the Israelites chose the path they chose is because they failed to consider God before they made their move. That's why they signed that bad contract. But once they signed that proverbial contract, the consequences were sealed. You've got to understand that. Consequences come with sin. It's not that God is punishing you because of your sin. Sin comes with natural consequences. That's what's going on here. So how do you choose the things that you choose in life? How do you make your choices in life? Think about how you move forward. Some people choose to put godly things on a shelf for a while, only to find out that it costs them in the area of their children later. People have done it. Well, I just stepped out of everything that I was supposed to be doing for a little while. I didn't know it was going to change their life. Small print. Sin always has a small print. It's always there. Some people choose to hold on to bitterness and anger only to find out that the price was the loss of their good character. It changed. I used to be such a happy person, and now I'm not anymore. Things have changed. I'm no longer who I thought I was going to be in the future. Now I ended up being somebody I never thought I would become because of all that bitterness and anger I was holding on to. People lose things all the time due to bad contracts with sin. It happens all the time. Satan is really, really good at deception. He's so good at deception. That looks good, doesn't it? Absolutely. Sign. Just sign. Sin always offers pleasure. Always. It wouldn't be tempting if it wasn't tempting. Temptation always comes with something that's desirable. Otherwise, it's not called temptation. Sin always looks tempting, but the reward is so much smaller than the price you're going to have to pay for signing that contract. Sin always comes with small print. Satan can get us so distracted with our responsibilities in life that we neglect to do what we know is right. I just got busy. I got too busy to do the things I know I was supposed to do. This is exactly what Moses warned the 2.5 tribes about before they entered the promised land. If you remember, these tribes wanted to possess the land outside of the promised land. We want this side of the Jordan River. Everybody else can have the promised land inside the land, but on the outside of the land, on this side of the Jordan River, we would like to possess this. So Moses makes them agree to something, but only after issuing the warning. Okay, so what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to come in and help us fight. You're going to help us conquer the land, and then you can have your land. You can have this. This is your possession. You can have this. But only after you help us conquer the promised land. They agree to this. So Moses tells them, before you agree to this, let me throw this warning out to you. Look at Numbers chapter 32 and verse 23. But if you do not do so, then take note, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. You made an agreement. You're going to help us conquer the promised land, and then you can have your land. But if you do not do this, you have sinned against God, and be sure your sin will find you out. This means that you will have to uphold the terms and conditions of the choices that you make. It's going to cost you. Bowing to sin's desires will always require you to fulfill the part of the contract that was written in small print. And it's such small print. Sometimes you didn't even see that there were consequences to your actions, but there's always consequences to your actions. Sin comes with consequences. It will always cost you something every single time. Every time. And anytime you see small print in a contract, there's something that is purposely not emphasized. That's why it's so much smaller. Don't pay any attention to the small print. It's not, we just don't want to emphasize that part. Usually, it's the consequences of signing the contract that's in small print. But they can't say you didn't tell them. We let them know. It was right there on the paper that they signed. Can't say I didn't say so. But you signed anyway. As children of God, we must acknowledge God in the decisions that we make. We've got to do it. We've got to do it. And every time we move forward in life, we've got to at least consider God. Remember, He's going with you. He's not just somebody to check in every once in a while. He's a life that lives with our life. He lives in us and through us. So everything that we do, we get to do with Him. Enjoy that. Enjoy that relationship, but understand that relationship's intact. And in all your ways, acknowledge Him. If we move forward without that, we can end up living with the effects of unwise choices. And we all understand that. We've done that before. And sometimes maybe we're living with the effects of unwise choices even now. On that note, I want to remind everyone that God is not going to be punishing us for sins we commit. He's not going to do that. Jesus already paid the complete price for all of your sins. It is finished. There's no longer a punishment required for the child of God. Your sins have been paid for in full. He already took care of that. However, consequences still come as part of the package of signing a bad contract with sin. Things still happen. Jesus took the punishment for your sin, but the consequences are yours. And we do have to face the consequences. The Israelites still had to pay for the price for neglecting God in their decision, but they did move forward and pay the consequences with integrity. They did do that. Just because we carry the consequences of signing a bad contract with sin does not mean that we cannot carry them in a way that pleases God. Sometimes we have to live with the consequences of the decisions that we make. All the time we have to live with the consequences of the decisions that we make. But you can live out those consequences with integrity, and you can do it in a way that pleases God. Sometimes we can even become the consequences of someone else's bad decision. Sometimes somebody else's decision can affect us, and we become the consequences of their bad decisions. So what do we do if we find ourselves in that position? I didn't do anything wrong, but now I'm the consequences of their choice. What do I do in that situation? Well, God's really good, and he tells us how to handle that one too. Look at Galatians chapter 6 and verse 1. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Even if we are negatively affected by the decisions of someone else, we are to help restore them. Help restore them. We don't hold their sins over their heads. We don't punish them because they made that decision. It says that we are supposed to restore them with a spirit of gentleness while guarding our own hearts so that we are not tempted to act in a sinful manner as well. Don't do it. Don't move forward in a sinful way because they moved forward in a sinful way. Restore them. Bring them back. Don't remind them all the time, hey, by the way, you're a filthy, rotten sinner. That's not your job. I'm going to make you pay, and I'm going to punish you forever with this. That is not what God told us to do. He said to restore them, and also consider yourself, lest you also be tempted. They are paying for the consequence of their sin. Don't add a sin that you're going to have to pay the consequences for on top of what they're already paying. Your job is to restore them. Bring them back. Let them know God's grace is sufficient. I'm going to give you grace. I'm going to offer you that grace. We help restore them with a spirit of gentleness. That's our job. We offer the same grace to them that God offered to us. When people start seeing God's grace, a broken world begins to mend. That's how that works. Why did you offer me grace when I didn't deserve it? That's just what grace is. That's what grace is. And God gave me grace when I didn't deserve it, so I'm extending that grace to you. That begins to mend broken lives. That begins to shine the light of God out to a broken world. That's what God tells us to do. Restore them. Don't punish them. Restore them. We've all made bad choices in our lives. Every single one of us. We've all done things without acknowledging God in our decisions. But that's all behind us now. By the way, right now, I think we're all good. We're all good. We're not currently making a bad decision without acknowledging God. I think we're good on this. All those other ones are behind us. Every single one of them are behind us. So how are we going to move forward? What are we going to do now moving forward from this moment? How are we going to move forward? I encourage everyone to put these two verses somewhere in your home, in your car, or something, so that you will regularly see them and live by them. I'm going to put two verses up right here, and I want you to, you can check out the video later online. It'll be there online. But here's the two verses. Proverbs 3:6. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. And Galatians 6:1. Brethren, if any man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. We've got to stop signing bad contracts. We've got to stop. And we need to help others heal after they have. God is good, and he shines his goodness through the lives of his people. Don't sign the bad contract with sin. And if you see that somebody else already signed a bad contract with sin, help restore them and bring them back. Show them God's grace. Show them God's love. A lot of times we move forward thinking we're good to go. I'm saved. I'm on my way to heaven. I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about my sins because Jesus Christ paid for them all on the cross. I'm good to go. I can move forward however I want to. Yes, you absolutely can. You have the freedom to do that. So there's no consequences. Wrong. Wrong. Sin comes with a lot of small print. And even as Christians, we get involved signing a lot of bad contracts. We cannot move forward signing bad contracts. Start moving forward the way you know you're supposed to be moving forward. Whatever you signed in the past is in the past. And maybe you're living through the consequences of those decisions. Well, do it with integrity. Do it with integrity. But move forward and don't sign those bad contracts. And help restore anybody else who has signed those bad contracts. And let's move forward living the grace of God through our lives into the lives of other people.